The galaxy is vast, filled with countless civilizations, some peaceful, others brutal. For centuries, the Interstellar Federation had maintained a fragile peace, a coalition of species united in their shared values of diplomacy, culture, and mutual respect. But then came the ancient invaders, a species so war-hardened, so relentlessly aggressive, that they had crushed every opponent that dared to face them. The war, though swift and destructive, left the galaxy in chaos, as planet after planet fell to the brutal conquerors. Their military power was overwhelming, their technology advanced beyond comprehension, and their appetite for domination knew no bounds. For the Federation, defeat seemed inevitable. Diplomacy had failed. Their forces, built for defense and preservation, were no match for the invaders' relentless onslaught. Desperation spread like wildfire among the alien coalition. They needed allies, and fast. But most of the advanced species had already fallen or refused to get involved, fearing the wrath of the invaders. In their search for hope, the Federation reached out to the most unlikely candidate: humanity. Humans had always been considered a minor player on the galactic stage. They were known for their technological ingenuity and adaptability, but their civilization was relatively young in comparison to the galaxy's elder species. In fact, much of humanity's past had remained a mystery to the Federation, especially their history of warfare. No one really expected much from them: primitive, small, not worth much attention. But the Federation was out of options. When the emissaries arrived on Earth, they found a planet that seemed almost untouched by the chaos of the galaxy. Humanity had largely remained neutral, keeping to themselves, preferring not to entangle their fate with that of the larger galactic powers. But when the Federation explained the dire situation, Earth's leaders couldn't ignore the threat. They understood that the war wouldn't stop with the Federation. Eventually, humanity would face the invaders too, whether they liked it or not. Yet humanity did not rush to the decision lightly. Earth's leaders convened, considering the cost of joining the conflict. They had seen wars before, but nothing on this scale. To the surprise of the Federation, humanity wasn't afraid of war. Rather, they were calculating, assessing their chances, determining how best to deploy their limited resources. What the Federation didn't understand at that moment was that war wasn't foreign to humans. In fact, it was woven into their very history, their very DNA. Earth's wars had been brutal, large-scale, and devastating, and they had learned to survive and thrive despite the odds. The decision was made. Humanity would join the war, but they would do it on their terms. The Federation was relieved, though they still had their doubts. The Federation had expected Earth to send a large fleet, to match the massive armadas of other alien species. Instead, humanity sent a modest contingent, just a few ships, some ground forces, nothing that seemed particularly impressive. Alien commanders viewed the human contribution as more symbolic than strategic, hoping that even a token gesture of unity might help bolster morale among the other races. They couldn't have been more wrong. From the very beginning, humans approached the war in ways that the Federation hadn't expected. Their ships, though fewer in number, were designed with precision and practicality. They didn't rely on the sleek, elegant designs favored by other races. Human vessels were sturdy, built for survival and adaptability, capable of withstanding far more punishment than their appearance suggested. And their soldiers, well, the soldiers were another matter entirely. The Federation had always seen war as a distant, calculated affair, fought with strategy and high technology. Humans, on the other hand, understood the chaos of battle in a way that shocked their alien counterparts. From guerrilla tactics to unconventional strategies, the humans were a whirlwind of unpredictability. Where other races relied on precision strikes and calculated maneuvers, humans embraced the chaos, using the very nature of war to their advantage. In their first engagement, humans didn't just fight. They ambushed, they sabotaged, they adapted to conditions that would have crippled other species. They hacked into enemy communications, used the terrain to their advantage, and made strategic sacrifices that turned the tide of battle. What had been expected to be a token participation quickly transformed into a pivotal moment in the war. The invaders, once so sure of their victory, were caught off guard by the sheer unpredictability of humanity's methods. The Federation watched in awe as human forces disrupted entire enemy supply lines, outflanking and outwitting enemies that had, until now, been considered undefeatable. Their command of terrain, their ability to anticipate enemy movements, and their willingness to do whatever it took to win stunned even the most hardened Federation generals. For the first time in years, the Federation felt a glimmer of hope. But it wasn't just their tactics that shocked the galaxy. It was their mentality. Humans fought with an intensity that the invaders couldn't match. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win, with a burning passion that resonated on every battlefield. When they lost soldiers, they didn't retreat in despair. They pushed harder, as if each loss fueled their determination. And when they won, they didn't celebrate. They simply prepared for the next battle, always looking ahead, always adapting, always ready for the next challenge. The alien warlords, used to straightforward warfare, found themselves disoriented and enraged by humanity's resilience. The humans didn't follow the predictable rules of combat that the invaders had come to rely on. Instead, they defied every expectation, turning the very chaos of war into their greatest weapon. Where other species would crumble under pressure, humans thrived, pushing their limits further than anyone had ever thought possible. What had started as a desperate plea for help from a peaceful federation had now become something far more extraordinary. Humanity, the so-called primitive species, had stepped onto the galactic stage and turned the entire war upside down. And as the battles raged on, one thing became abundantly clear to both the Federation and the invaders alike: humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity's entry into the war was quiet, almost unnoticed at first. Their fleet, though functional, didn't draw much attention. But the Federation had underestimated their new allies. What they couldn't see, what no one could understand, was how differently humans approached battle. The moment they deployed, it became apparent that humanity's strength lay not in numbers or in the sophistication of their technology, but in their ability to adapt and improvise. They didn't simply follow the established rules of war, they rewrote them. In their first major engagement, humans were tasked with supporting a defensive line on a contested world. The alien Federation expected a straightforward battle, a show of force, rigid formations, precision strikes. But that wasn't how humanity fought. Instead of positioning their forces as expected, the human commanders scouted the battlefield like predators sizing up their prey. They knew the terrain mattered more than sheer firepower, and they exploited it to the fullest. From the start, human forces utilized tactics alien to their allies. Where the Federation's troops would have held the line, humans moved swiftly, conducting hit-and-run attacks that left the enemy disoriented. Their soldiers were light on their feet, moving in and out of cover, vanishing before the enemy could mount a proper counterattack. This wasn't the clean, efficient combat that the Federation was used to. It was messy, chaotic, unpredictable. And it worked. The invaders, known for their brute strength and overwhelming numbers, found themselves flustered by these smaller, seemingly insignificant human forces. The humans didn't fight like the other races. They didn't rely on technological superiority or massive fleets. They relied on something far more dangerous: ingenuity. They used deception, setting up false positions and traps. They hacked into enemy systems, feeding them false information and misdirecting their movements. The invaders were used to dominating their foes with raw power, but they had never faced anything like this. What truly set humanity apart was their willingness to risk everything for victory. Other species were cautious, valuing their lives and equipment, but humans had a different mindset. They took risks that no one else would consider. Their ground forces infiltrated enemy positions with shocking precision, sometimes without any support from the main Federation lines. Small squads would strike deep into enemy territory, sabotaging supply depots, cutting communications, and even turning the invaders' own weapons against them. These weren't just soldiers. They were tacticians, using every ounce of intelligence, creativity, and bravery to outmaneuver a vastly superior foe. For the invaders, this was a nightmare. They had faced many enemies before, but never one like this. Humans didn't follow the rules of war as the invaders understood them. They didn't engage in direct, head-on battles unless absolutely necessary. Instead, they struck from the shadows, hit fast, and disappeared. To the invaders, this wasn't warfare, it was something far worse, something unpredictable, something terrifying. The invaders began to hesitate, unsure of where the next attack would come from. Their confidence, once unshakable, was now eroding with each ambush, each unexpected strike. The Federation, still struggling to comprehend humanity's tactics, started to realize they had underestimated their new allies. The humans weren't just surviving, they were winning, turning the tide of the war in ways no one had anticipated. One incident stood out in particular. A human strike team had been deployed to disable a critical enemy installation that was considered untouchable by Federation standards. The installation was deep behind enemy lines, guarded by the most advanced defenses the invaders could muster. The Federation wouldn't have dared to send their own forces on such a mission, but the humans didn't hesitate. They studied the defenses, found weaknesses where others saw none, and launched their assault. It wasn't a large force, just a handful of soldiers, heavily outgunned and outnumbered. But they didn't need to match the enemy's firepower. They hacked into the enemy's systems, shutting down their defenses long enough to slip past unnoticed. Once inside, they sabotaged critical infrastructure, planting explosives and creating chaos among the invaders. By the time the invaders realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans had already extracted and detonated the charges, leaving the installation in ruins. The Federation was stunned. They had always valued precision and planning, but the humans had shown them something entirely different, an ability to adapt on the fly, to turn any situation into an advantage. What the Federation saw as reckless, humanity saw as necessary. To them, the cost of failure was far greater than the risk of daring tactics. And that mindset, that willingness to push boundaries and embrace the chaos of battle, was what made them so dangerous. The invaders, once so sure of their dominance, began to falter. They couldn't predict humanity's next move. Every engagement was a new puzzle, with the humans changing their tactics to fit the situation. One moment, they were launching coordinated assaults, the next, they were disappearing into the shadows, only to strike again from an entirely different direction. For the first time, the invaders found themselves unsure. They had expected to crush the humans easily, just as they had every other species that dared oppose them. But these humans were different. Their tactics were unconventional, yes, but they were also brutally effective. Humans didn't fight like other races, and that unpredictability was their greatest weapon. The Federation began to understand this, slowly adjusting their own strategies to match the human approach. They started incorporating human tactics into their own battle plans, realizing that what they had once considered reckless was, in fact, the key to survival. As the war raged on, humanity's presence grew stronger. Their forces, small in number compared to the Federation's massive fleets, were winning battles that no one thought possible. The invaders, once so confident in their superiority, were now on the defensive, scrambling to counter the human threat. They had never faced an enemy like this, one that didn't fear them, one that adapted to every challenge, one that fought with a level of determination that defied reason. The invaders couldn't understand it. They had fought countless battles across the galaxy, conquering worlds and crushing resistance wherever they went. But these humans, they were something different. No matter how many times the invaders regrouped, no matter how many strategies they tried, humanity was always one step ahead, always finding a new way to disrupt their plans. The Federation, once skeptical of humanity's contribution, now realized that their very survival depended on these strange, unpredictable allies. The humans were more than just soldiers. They were warriors in every sense of the word, capable of turning the tide of the war through sheer force of will and unmatched tactical brilliance. And as the war dragged on, one thing became clear to everyone in the galaxy: humanity was not to be underestimated. As the war progressed, humanity's role became more vital with each passing day. What had initially been seen as a small contribution had now transformed into something the Federation relied on. But humanity's presence wasn't just felt in their tactics and victories, it was in their unyielding spirit. Battles were hard fought, and losses were inevitable, but what set humans apart was their refusal to back down, no matter the cost. Their endurance was something the Federation had never seen before. In every engagement, the human forces were on the front lines, taking the brunt of the enemy's attacks. The invaders had quickly realized that humanity posed the greatest threat to their plans, and they focused their efforts on trying to break them. But no matter how hard the invaders pushed, no matter how overwhelming their forces were, the humans held firm. Even when it seemed like all hope was lost, when they were outnumbered and surrounded, they fought with an intensity that left even their allies in awe. Human soldiers were known for their adaptability, but even more for their tenacity. In one particularly grueling battle, the invaders had laid siege to a key Federation stronghold, cutting off all supply lines and isolating the defenders. Federation forces were demoralized, certain that the stronghold would fall within days. But the humans, instead of retreating or surrendering, dug in. They used every resource available to them, rationing supplies, fortifying their positions, and preparing for a long, drawn-out conflict. For weeks, the siege dragged on, with the invaders throwing everything they had at the human defenders. But the humans didn't break. They adapted to the harsh conditions, enduring hunger, exhaustion, and constant bombardment. They repurposed damaged equipment, turned debris into makeshift weapons, and kept morale high through sheer willpower. The invaders, used to overwhelming their enemies quickly, grew frustrated. No matter how hard they hit, the humans hit back harder. It was this endurance, this refusal to surrender, that began to wear down the invaders. For a species that had never known defeat, the idea that a smaller, less technologically advanced force could withstand their might was unthinkable. Yet here were these humans, fighting with an intensity that defied logic. The Federation, watching from the sidelines, realized that humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for victory, no matter the odds. What baffled the invaders even more was the humans' willingness to sacrifice. Other species, when faced with overwhelming odds, would retreat to save their forces. But humans, they didn't run. They stood their ground, even when it meant certain death. Time and again, small squads of human soldiers would volunteer for near-suicidal missions, striking deep into enemy territory to sabotage supply lines, take out key targets, and create chaos behind enemy lines. These missions were often deadly, with few survivors, but they always achieved their objectives. The invaders couldn't understand it. To them, war was a calculated game of power and strategy, where preserving resources and forces was key. But to the humans, victory was worth any price. They didn't fear death, they embraced it if it meant achieving their goal. This mentality was alien to the invaders, who valued strength and dominance above all else. They had never encountered a species that fought like this, with such reckless abandon, such disregard for their own safety, and such determination to win, no matter the cost. As the war dragged on, the invaders began to fear humanity, not just for their tactics, but for their resilience. Even after suffering heavy casualties, the humans never faltered. They rebuilt, they adapted, and they came back stronger each time. The Federation watched in awe as human forces, despite being battered and bruised, continued to push forward, never once considering defeat as an option. One of the most significant turning points came during a critical campaign to retake a series of Federation planets that had fallen to the invaders. The invaders had fortified their positions, confident that their defenses were impenetrable. Federation forces, weakened and demoralized, were hesitant to launch a counterattack. But the humans, they had a different plan. Instead of launching a direct assault, as the invaders expected, the humans devised a series of complex guerrilla attacks, targeting key infrastructure, supply routes, and communication hubs. They struck in small, coordinated teams, moving swiftly and disappearing before the invaders could mount a proper defense. These attacks weren't meant to win the battle outright. They were meant to weaken the invaders, to create confusion and fear, to make the invaders question their own strength. And it worked. The invaders, once so sure of their victory, found themselves scrambling to defend against an enemy they couldn't see. Each time they thought they had the humans cornered, the humans would strike from another angle, using the terrain and their superior knowledge of the battlefield to their advantage. The invaders, who had relied on brute force for so long, found themselves outmaneuvered by a smaller, more agile force that seemed to be everywhere at once. But it wasn't just tactics that won the day. It was the humans' sheer determination. In one of the final assaults, a human battalion, heavily outnumbered and running low on supplies, launched a last-ditch effort to take down the invaders' command center. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew that this was their chance to turn the tide of the war. The battle was brutal. The humans faced wave after wave of enemy forces, each more determined than the last. But they didn't retreat. They didn't give up. Even when their ammunition ran low, even when their casualties mounted, they pressed on. They fought hand to hand when necessary, using whatever they could find to keep the invaders at bay. And in the end, their determination paid off. The invaders, overwhelmed by the relentless human assault, were forced to retreat, leaving the command center in human hands. The Federation, watching from the sidelines, was stunned. They had never seen such raw courage, such willingness to sacrifice for victory. The humans had not only turned the tide of the battle, they had turned the tide of the war. The invaders, once so confident in their dominance, now feared humanity more than any other force in the galaxy. It wasn't just about tactics or strategy anymore. It was about willpower. The humans had shown the galaxy that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how dire the situation, they would never back down. They would fight, they would endure, and they would win. And in the end, that's what made humanity truly terrifying to their enemies. Not their technology, not their numbers, but their unbreakable spirit. The war had reached a turning point. What began as a desperate defense against overwhelming forces had now become something else entirely. Humanity, once dismissed as an insignificant ally, had risen to the forefront of the conflict, leading the charge in a final, all-out offensive to reclaim the Federation's lost worlds. The invaders, once thought to be unbeatable, were now on the defensive, scrambling to regroup in the face of a relentless human advance. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as human forces prepared for what everyone knew would be the decisive battle. Federation leaders, initially skeptical of humanity's methods, now placed their full trust in the humans. They had seen what these strange, unpredictable warriors were capable of. Humanity didn't just fight battles, they dismantled their enemies piece by piece, exploiting every weakness, every flaw, until their enemies had no choice but to retreat or be destroyed. The invaders, now fully aware of humanity's threat, had fortified their remaining strongholds with everything they had. These were no ordinary defenses. The invaders had poured every resource into ensuring that their final line of defense would be impenetrable. They believed that if they could hold their ground here, they could still turn the war in their favor. But humanity had other plans. Instead of a massive, direct assault, the humans continued with their strategy of calculated strikes, but this time, it was on a scale that no one had ever seen before. They launched simultaneous attacks across multiple fronts, forcing the invaders to spread their forces thin, unsure of where the true offensive would come from. Human fleets moved with precision, their ground forces striking key targets and retreating before the invaders could fully mobilize. Every strike weakened the invaders just a little more, eroding their confidence, pushing them closer to the edge of collapse. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The humans, despite being outnumbered, fought with a level of coordination and ferocity that left the invaders reeling. They had learned the invaders' tactics, anticipated their moves, and countered them at every turn. Every strike was deliberate, every attack perfectly timed. It was as though the humans were playing a game that the invaders didn't even understand. And for the first time, the invaders felt something they had never experienced before: fear. What made humanity so terrifying wasn't just their tactics or their endurance, though those were certainly impressive. It was their ability to adapt, to turn every situation to their advantage, no matter how dire. The invaders, used to dominating their foes with brute force, found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy that refused to play by the rules. Humans were unpredictable, constantly shifting their strategies, always finding a way to surprise their opponents. As the battle raged on, the humans made their final push. They targeted the heart of the invaders' defenses, the command center that controlled their entire war effort. The invaders had fortified this position beyond anything the Federation had ever seen. It was a fortress, guarded by legions of the invaders' most elite warriors. But the humans didn't flinch. They saw it as just another challenge to overcome. The assault on the command center was brutal. Human forces faced wave after wave of enemy resistance, but they never slowed down. Their soldiers moved with a singular purpose, cutting through the invaders with precision and efficiency. The invaders, desperate to hold their ground, threw everything they had into the defense, but it wasn't enough. Humanity's relentless advance couldn't be stopped. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, and they weren't about to let anything stand in their way. In the end, the invaders' defenses crumbled. The humans breached the command center, dismantling the invaders' control network and leaving their entire war effort in disarray. The invaders, once so sure of their dominance, had been brought to their knees by a force they had underestimated from the beginning. Their leaders, once confident in their superiority, were now fleeing, their empire in ruins. The Federation, watching from the sidelines, could hardly believe what they were seeing. Humanity, the species they had once dismissed as too small, too primitive, had done the impossible. They had not only defeated the invaders, they had shattered them, leaving their empire in pieces, their armies broken, and their reputation destroyed. But victory didn't come without a cost. The human forces had suffered heavy losses, their ranks depleted by the sheer intensity of the fighting. Yet even in the face of such losses, they stood tall. For humanity, the victory wasn't just about defeating the invaders. It was about proving something to themselves and to the galaxy. They had shown that they were not to be underestimated, that they were more than capable of standing alongside the galaxy's most advanced species, not just as equals, but as leaders. In the aftermath of the war, humanity's role in the galaxy changed forever. No longer were they seen as a minor player in galactic affairs. Their contributions to the war had earned them the respect of even the most advanced species in the Federation. They had proven that they were not just survivors, they were warriors, capable of achieving victory through sheer determination, intelligence, and an unbreakable will to succeed. The invaders, once feared across the galaxy, were now a shadow of their former selves. Their empire, which had spanned countless star systems, was in ruins. Their armies, once thought to be unstoppable, had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. And the galaxy, once in fear of the invaders' power, now looked to humanity with a mixture of awe and respect. Humanity's victory wasn't just a military triumph, it was a statement. They had shown the galaxy that strength wasn't just about technology or numbers. It was about adaptability, resilience, and the willingness to fight for what mattered. They had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could stand tall and emerge victorious. As the galaxy moved forward, humanity's influence continued to grow. They became leaders, not through conquest or domination, but through the respect they had earned on the battlefield. The Federation, once hesitant to involve humanity in its affairs, now sought their counsel, recognizing that humanity's unique approach to conflict was something that could benefit them all. The invaders, though defeated, would never forget the lessons they had learned from humanity. Their once unshakable confidence had been shattered, and they now understood that true strength didn't come from power alone. It came from the ability to endure, to adapt, and to fight with everything you had, no matter the cost. And so, humanity stood as a symbol of resilience and determination, a species that had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer and had emerged stronger for it. The invaders had been shocked when humanity entered the war, but by the end, the entire galaxy knew one thing for certain: humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they would never be underestimated again.